Nobody tells you that one of the hardest parts of starting over isn't always the actual work. Sometimes it's the moment you realize you're sitting in a room full of people 10 years younger than you, and you're the one asking where the copy machine is, or how to log in to the system, or who you're supposed to send an email to. Meanwhile, your ego is sitting in the corner with his arms crossed, like, excuse me, we used to know things. And that's when you realize starting over will humble you in ways nobody puts on the inspirational quote. Because people love talking about the comeback. They love the I bet on myself story. They love the before and after, but nobody talks about the middle. Nobody posts, today I had no idea what I was doing. Nobody posts, today I questioned every decision that brought me here. Nobody posts, today somebody half my age had to explain something to me 3 times and I smiled like I understood it after the first explanation. Nobody posts those things. Nobody posts, today I went home, sat in my car for 20 minutes and wondered if I had completely lost my mind. But that is often what starting over actually looks like.
Welcome to the Made You Think podcast. Podcast. Hi. Yeah. Welcome to the Made You Think podcast. Welcome to the Made You Think
Welcome
podcast.
back to the Made You Think podcast. I am your host, Megan Scorp, and I am so glad you decided to spend some time with me today. But before we get into today's conversation, here's my quick disclaimer. I am not a licensed therapist, psychologist, or clinical professional. I am simply sharing thoughts, observations, personal experiences, and lessons I've learned while trying to figure out this thing called life. This podcast is about reflection and it's about growth. It's about having conversations that might make us laugh, might make us uncomfortable, shake our heads, or sit back and say, okay, all right. That one hit a little too close to home. But if you're new here, I encourage you to go back to listening to Stop Calling It Loyalty When It's Really Fear. Your comfort zone isn't peace, it's familiarity. Your comfort zone is your prison. Because those conversations led us right here. We talked about fear. We talked about staying in situations because they were familiar. We talked about confusing comfort with peace. But here's the question nobody really prepares you for. What happens after you finally leave? What happens when you finally say, I can't keep doing this? Or what happens when you walk away from the job, leave a relationship, change careers, go back to school, start a business, or just simply decide the version of life you've been living isn't working for you anymore? What happens next? Sometimes you're starting over, and sometimes starting over is embarrassing as hell. But let's talk about it. Put your thinking caps on, grab your favorite beverage, and let's dig in. See, we have turned starting over into a motivational poster. We see somebody announce a new beginning and immediately imagine this beautiful montage: new planner, new clothes, fresh haircut, new do, sun shining through the window, maybe a little inspirational music playing in the background. And we say, this is my season. And listen, I love a good fresh start. Give me a new notebook and a nice pen, and suddenly I feel like I can reorganize my entire life. I don't even know what I'm writing down yet, but I feel productive. But what I've learned is that starting over usually doesn't feel like a movie. Sometimes it feels like you made a decision that sounded really good in your head until you actually had to live it. There's a moment, there's a moment after the excitement wears off. You've made the announcement, you told your family, you've updated your resume, you may have even launched a business. You moved out. But then Wednesday comes. Just a regular old Wednesday, humpback day. There's no inspirational soundtrack, no applause, no crowd standing around saying, "Look at you! You're so brave." It's just you. And now you have to figure out what you're doing. And that's when starting over becomes real. And I think that's the part that can be difficult. Because before you start, you can imagine yourself succeeding. But once you begin, you have to face something else. You are going to be the inexperienced one again. Now, you have spent years being competent in what you left, but now you're the new kid on the block. Huh. That can do something to your ego. Are you thinking? Are you reflecting? Because, see, one of the things I think people underestimate is how much identity can be connected to competence. Think about it. You may have spent 20 years in a career. You know the systems, you know the language, you know who to call, you know the people to ask questions to. You were the person who could walk into a room and immediately know what was going on, why we're here, what we need. You don't need directions. You the one gave the directions. And then one day, for whatever reason, you find yourself somewhere new. And suddenly, you're the one asking questions. Lots of questions. Questions you may have been too embarrassed to ask at first because you thought, I should already know this. And that's when I learned something very, very important. Being experienced in one area does not automatically make you experienced everywhere. Sounds obvious, right? But try living it. You can spend 20 years being successful in one thing and still be a complete beginner in something else. You can manage people and then struggle to manage the technology for your new business. You can be brilliant at your profession and sit down to edit a video and suddenly feel like you need to call somebody's 12-year-old child for assistance, like I do. Because apparently children are born knowing how to do things of the now. You ask a teenager, how'd you do that? And they look at you like you've got 3 heads. What do you mean? They don't even know. Their thumbs just move. They click, 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 click here. Meanwhile, you over there clicking buttons and accidentally open up like 13 tabs. And this is where pride can become a problem. Because sometimes we don't quit because the work is too hard. Sometimes we quit because we don't like how it feels to be bad at something, to be overwhelmed. So let that sit for a minute. Because sometimes the hardest thing isn't failing, it's being seen that you're learning. Did it make you think? See, this is one of the biggest lessons. And I know if y'all hear me in the podcast, I learned a lot of big lessons in life. But there were moments when I started something new and immediately thought, yeah, maybe I'm not supposed to do this. Why? Not because I had proof that I couldn't do it, but because I wasn't immediately good at it. And if we're honest, a lot of us do this, especially when we're doing a career change. We try something, it's awkward, we make mistakes, we don't even understand everything. And suddenly, we've created a new story and a new story in our head that says, I guess I'm not that talented. Maybe I'm too old for this. Or, hey, I missed my opportunity when I was younger. Uh, I guess other people are just better at this. No, none of those are true. Sometimes things are just new. That's it. They're new. You change careers, you go from a teacher to HR. There's new rules to learn. There's a lot. And this new can become awkward. But nobody walks into something they've never done before and performs like they've been doing it for 10 years. At least nobody I've met. Maybe you've met them. Because if you have, I got questions. Because seriously, I've had to catch myself when I started attaching meaning to every uncomfortable moment. If something felt difficult, I thought maybe I was going in the wrong direction. But eventually, I started realizing that difficulty and wrong are not the same thing. Sometimes difficulty is difficult because you're learning. Sometimes things are uncomfortable because you're stretching. And sometimes you're just frustrated simply because your brain is trying to build a skill it doesn't even have yet. But that doesn't mean turn around. It simply means just stay long enough to stop being terrible at it. Because we don't talk enough about the fact that almost everything looks embarrassing before it looks impressive. Ever ridden a skateboard? I've never ridden a skateboard, but I saw my daughter do it. And she fell because she's never done it before. It's not embarrassing to me, but it was embarrassing to her because she fell. But I was like, get back up and try it again until she got it. But let's talk about career changes. Because starting over professionally can hit your pride in a very, very particular place. You may have spent years working your way up and have the experience. You got the title, you got the responsibility. People may be reporting to you, you're making decisions, and you even have an office. Then life changes. Or you change and you decide to go in a whole nother direction. Now you're back to learning. Maybe you're applying for jobs that don't immediately recognize everything you've done. Maybe you're trying to explain how your previous experience transfers into something new. Maybe you're competing with people who have been in that particular industry longer, and you have to sit there and say, yeah, I know I'm new to this area, but here is what I bring. And that takes humility, especially when you know what you've accomplished before and you're trying to bring it over to something new. I think one of the most uncomfortable parts of starting over is when your previous success doesn't automatically translate into immediate success in your new chapter. You know you're capable, but now you have to prove it again to new people. And proving yourself again can feel exhausting and overwhelming. There were times when I thought, do I really have to introduce myself all over again? Yeah, you do. You have to tell your story differently. You have to explain your skills. You have to learn the new language for the new industry that you're going to. You have to be willing to say, I haven't done it exactly that way, but here's what I have done. And I am willing to learn your process. Sounds familiar? Because this doesn't erase your experience. Starting at the beginning of something new does not mean you're starting from zero. And that is something I had to remind myself. I may be new to the environment, but I still bring everything that I've learned from before to the new environment. But I still have the ability to have good work ethic. I still have life experiences. I still have the mistakes that I've made. But I'm not coming to a new industry or a new job or a new place empty handed. I'm bringing all of the tools that I've learned over the years, just bringing them into a new room. And sometimes you have to figure out which tools still work. But can we talk about this question? You run into somebody you haven't seen in a while, and they say, "Hey, so what are you doing now?" And suddenly, you feel like you're standing in front of a microphone with a whole spotlight on you because maybe your answer doesn't sound as impressive as it used to. Maybe you're in transition. Maybe you're just looking. Maybe you're figuring it out. And I had to learn to become comfortable saying, "I'm figuring it out." You know how difficult that can be when you're used to having an answer? When you're used to being able to say, "Oh, I work here," or "I work there," or "My title is this." There's something uncomfortable about being in a season where your identity isn't neatly packaged anymore. But I've started looking at it differently. Sometimes the most honest answer is, "I'm in transition." And that's enough. You don't owe everybody a 5-year business plan just because they ask you what you're doing. You don't have to explain every decision of your life or defend every new beginning. And honestly, learn that some people aren't asking because they genuinely want to understand. They're just curious. And you don't need to perform your life for curious people. Now, everybody doesn't get a front row seat to your process. Some people just have to wait for the results. Because when you're in the messy middle, too many opinions can make you question things you haven't even had enough time to understand yourself. Did I make you think? Because starting a business, a podcast, a creative project, or anything that requires you to put yourself out there, yeah, it will humble you. You can spend 3 weeks working on something, planning, researching, watching videos, taking notes, and practically just overthinking. And you publish it. And you're expecting a whole lot of people, but you get 4. One is you, one is your cousin. Somebody may have clicked it accidentally. And the 4th person might actually even just be a bot telling you to invest in cryptocurrency. And you're sitting there thinking, really? But here's why I'm still learning. Because, see, the early stage is supposed to be quiet. We have become so accustomed to seeing the finished success that we think something is wrong when nobody notices us immediately. But most things start small, and we have to remember that. Your one idea, I know we go off of the one-hit wonders in the music industry, but that one idea is going to take time. Most businesses don't open with a crowd waiting outside. Most podcasts don't get millions of listeners on the first episode. The beginning is very quiet. And if you're not prepared for quiet, you may quit before the work has time to grow. And I had to learn not to interpret a lack of immediate attention as proof that I was doing something that had no value. Because, see, some people just haven't seen it yet. Sometimes the audience just hasn't found you. And sometimes you need to polish it up, get a little bit better. It's okay. Because it's not an insult to your process. You are still learning. And growth becomes easier when you stop needing every first attempt to prove you're talented. Sometimes the first attempt exists simply to teach you what to do differently the second time. That make you think? One of the biggest reasons people don't start over. It's not always failure. Sometimes it's the fear of witnesses. What will happen if people see me try? What would happen if they saw me struggle? What if they remember where I've been and where I am now? And I had to think about that because people may see you change careers. They may see you decide to go back to school. They may see you try something that just didn't work. But you know what I've learned from that? Most people are thinking about themselves far more than they're thinking about you. We're all worried about someone watching us while they're worried about somebody watching them. See, everybody is standing in the middle of their own movie. And even if somebody does judge you, what exactly are you supposed to do? Are you going to stop your life? Are you going to stay miserable? Are you going to remain in something you've outgrown because good old Karen from high school might have an opinion? Karen has probably forgotten your birthday. She'll survive your career change, and so will you. I had to get honest about how much of my hesitation came from imaginary conversations happening in other people's heads. I was spending way too much energy responding to criticisms that hadn't even happened. And eventually, I had to ask, how long am I going to let imaginary embarrassment make real decisions for me? Because that's what it can do. But while you're managing these imaginary reactions, real time is moving. The realization made you uncomfortable, but it also made you remember that. You gotta keep going. Did that make you think? Starting over doesn't always look like progress at first. Sometimes it looks like you're going backwards. Sometimes you may not even understand yourself. But look at your life and think, how did I get back here? Because I've learned that going backward and going back are not the same thing. Sometimes you take a step backwards to change direction. Sometimes you leave one level because you realize you were climbing the wrong ladder. And just because you have to start lower on a different ladder doesn't mean you made the wrong decision. At least now you're climbing towards something you actually want. That's different. And I think we have to stop measuring every season by appearances, because from outside, transition can look like failure. But from the inside, it may be the first honest decision you've made in years. Did I make you think? When starting over gets difficult, you can suddenly become very nostalgic about the life you wanted to lead. Isn't that funny? You'll leave a situation that made you miserable. Then 3 difficult days later, in your new beginning, you'll say, you know what? Maybe it wasn't so bad. Maybe I should have stayed at my job. But because you may want to go back, you forget the stress. You forget why you wanted change. You forget the nights you couldn't sleep. And that's the familiarity that can become very attractive when the new stuff is very uncomfortable and overwhelming. That's why you have to remember why you left. See, the past can look better when the present is uncertain. But uncertainty doesn't automatically mean you made a mistake. Sometimes it simply means you're between versions of your life. In the middle, it can be ugly, it can be lonely, it can make you question yourself. But the middle is also where you learn who you are and when you can't rely on the old identity of yourself anymore. Did I make you think? Because you may have to ask yourself the hard question. Do I actually want to go back? Or do I just hate feeling inexperienced in my new chapter? Because those are different things. Maybe you didn't miss the old situation. Maybe you just miss being good at something. Maybe you miss the confidence that came from the familiarity. And once you understand that, you stop allowing temporary discomfort to make permanent decisions. Realize that your ego wants guarantees. See, my ego wanted to look competent immediately. I wanted people to approve what I was doing. I wanted to skip where I didn't know what I was doing. But see, life doesn't work like that. If you want something different, at some point, you're going to have to tolerate being unfamiliar. You're going to have to walk into rooms where nobody knows your name. You're going to have to Google some things, a lot of things. And you may have to pretend you weren't just on YouTube watching how to do the thing I just told everybody I was going to do. But that's okay. It's called learning. That's all it is. And I stopped trying to hide the fact that I was learning. I don't know everything. Believe me. Me and Google are great friends. So instead of pretending I understood everything, I just started asking questions. Not every question needs to be followed by, I'm sorry. Because I used to apologize for not knowing things. I'm sorry, but can you explain that one more time? Why am I apologizing? I didn't commit a crime. I'm just asking a question so I can have better clarity. And I had to remember to stop expecting myself to learn everything at once. When you're starting something new, you can look at the entire mountain and panic. But understand there are skills that you need, there's people you need to meet, there's a process. And when you start realizing that, you'll sit on your couch eating snacks and go, I think I'm getting it now. Take one step at a time. Because sometimes progress is just one application, one video, one class. And stop disrespecting that small progress just because it wasn't dramatic enough. Did I make you think? Because when you're starting over, you become so focused on that final destination that you may ignore the evidence that you're already moving. Maybe last week you didn't understand something, but guess what? This week you learned something and you know a little bit more. That's progress. Maybe your first video was awkward. Hmm. But your 10th video is less awkward. In everything you do, there will be improvement. The person who keeps showing up awkwardly usually learns more than the person who waits until they're confident. Because confidence has a funny way of showing up after repetition, not before. Start trusting yourself again by doing the things you wasn't sure you could do. Because you can do it. It may not be perfect, but if you keep trying, you will get it. And eventually, you can look back and say, oh, I actually know more than I knew 3 months ago. That is how growth works. It's difficult to see it when you're inside it, but that's why it takes time for reflection. And you may say to yourself, oh, when did I learn that? You learned it little by little. That's when you learned. But see, life has taught me that sometimes something can fail and still teach you exactly what you needed to learn. A job can end and show you what you don't want anymore. A business can flop and teach you what your audience actually needs. A decision can disappoint you and still make you wiser. Not everything that ends or fails was pointless, which means it's not final because you're still learning. Some experiences exist to prepare you, others exist to redirect you. And the problem is when you're in the middle of your disappointment, you usually can't see that yet. You're just sitting there going, well, this is not in the brochure, or this is not what I was expecting. I thought I was being buried, but I was actually just being moved. And that's the one thing that is not giving out on those inspirational cards. Sometimes life changes the plan. And instead of asking, why is this happening to me? Just start asking this: what is the situation teaching me that I couldn't have learned if everything had gone according to my plan? Because God's plan is definitely different than your plan. And sometimes that answer is not going to come when you want it. But do know, if you keep moving and you keep learning, you will eventually understand why this did not go according to your plan. And your life isn't over just because one version of it ended. One thing I noticed when I started changing was everybody has an opinion, but not every opinion deserves equal weight. Some people will advise you based on their own fear. Some people will tell you not to try because they wouldn't try it. And some people will tell you to stay because your change makes them uncomfortable. And all of that is okay. You don't need everybody to understand your decisions. You need to understand why you are making them. And you may not understand everything. Just know that you can't stay where you are. You don't always need a complete explanation for your next chapter. Did I make you think? Starting over does not automatically mean you fail. It means you've changed. It means your priorities change. And now you're trying to figure out what to do with what happened. And that is life. We're constantly being taught that success should be a straight line. Graduate, get the job, get promoted, buy a house. Everything goes according to plan. But real life looks more like somebody handed a toddler a crayon and said, draw me a map. It's all over the place. And yet, you still get somewhere beautiful. Your path doesn't have to look traditional to be meaningful. You don't have to be ashamed because your story had chapters you didn't plan. You don't have to apologize because you're rebuilding your life. because rebuilding takes courage, especially when people only saw the finished version of what you had before. They may not understand why you're starting again, but you know what? They don't need permission to rebuild your life. You build your life. And I think that's ultimately what starting over has taught me. It's not about learning a new job or starting a business. The deeper work is learning to trust yourself again. Trust that you can survive being uncomfortable. Trust that you can make a mistake and recover. Trust that if something doesn't work, your life isn't over. And that kind of trust isn't built by standing still, it's built through experience. You do something difficult, you survived, you learned, try something else, try it again, and you'll survive that too. And eventually, you stop needing that guarantee before you move because you realize I may not know exactly what is going to happen, but I've handled things I didn't expect before. And that is powerful. So if you're in a season of starting over, maybe you changed careers, maybe you lost something you thought would last forever, maybe you're learning a new skill, maybe you're single again, maybe you're simply just trying to figure out who you are after spending years being who everybody else needed you to be. Please remember this. It's okay if you don't look impressive. It's okay if you have questions. It's okay if you're learning. And it's okay if you're embarrassed. Yeah, I said it. You're allowed to feel embarrassed. You don't have to pretend every moment of growth feels empowering. Sometimes it feels uncomfortable. Sometimes it feels humbling. But don't confuse embarrassment with a sign that you should quit. You may simply be experiencing something you haven't experienced in a long time, and that is being new. And guess what? Being new is temporary. You won't stay new forever. Because if you keep showing up and you keep learning and you keep adjusting, one day somebody else is going to walk into that room and ask you, "Can you show me how to do this?" And you're going to pause and you're going to remember there was a time you was that person and you didn't know. You're going to remember when you were the one asking the questions. And suddenly you'll realize you are no longer the beginner and you have survived being new. So don't let the embarrassment of being a beginner convince you to go back to a life you've already outgrown. Don't let pride keep you in places where your spirit has already left. Don't let the fear of looking foolish stop you from becoming someone you're proud of. You may feel awkward. You may feel uncertain. You may feel like everybody else knows what they're doing. But guess what? They don't. Some of them are just better at acting confident. So take that class, send that application, start the business, go on the date, do what you need to do. And if you mess it up, congratulations. You are participating in your life. Because the truth is, you can stay where you're comfortable and wonder what might have happened if you had just taken the step. Or you can be uncomfortable for a while and discover what you're actually capable of. And I don't know about you, but I've spent enough time wondering. I'd rather learn, try something new. I'd rather be embarrassed occasionally. Because trust me, there will be occasions that I'm embarrassed. Because I'm learning, I'm living, I'm laughing, I'm adjusting. And sometimes we all need to just start over. Not because the first version of our life was a failure, but because we've outgrown it. And since we're still growing, starting over isn't always about going back to the beginning. It's about starting a new chapter in our lives. Sometimes it's just taking everything you've learned and finally using it to build something different. I hope I made you think. And I thank you for spending time with me on the Made You Think podcast. If this episode made you think about a fresh start you've been avoiding, send it to somebody else also who may need to hear it. And remember, you don't need to have your entire life figured out. You don't need to know every step. You don't need to look confident while you're learning. Just don't allow temporary embarrassment on being a beginner to keep you permanently stuck somewhere you've already outgrown. So that's all for today. Stop thinking, start doing, and build your future. Make sure to subscribe and follow Made You Think so you never miss an episode. Until next time, keep thinking, keep growing, keep learning. And if life makes you start over, take a deep breath and just ask where that copy machine is. And keep going anyway, because one day you'll be the person who knows where everything is. This has Made You Think.